So we're going to take a look at observation for planning and assessment. This is chapter 14. So use of your observations. We can use observations to help us plan curriculum and to complete assessment. And this is, by the way, one of our key ECE professionals' responsibilities. We need to make sure that we follow developmentally appropriate practices as we use our observation for these purposes. We want to make sure that we're considering what's appropriate for the child's age, for their own individual development, for their interests, and their culture and first language. We need to strongly avoid getting talked into teaching to the test or focusing on something related to the assessments and school readiness approach of K through 12, and stay true to our principles and practices in professional ethics. We need to share our observation notes as a team, and this can be really valuable resource for planning curriculum so that what everyone sees is incorporated. Post documentation to share with the children and their families, and avoid, when we're planning curriculum, utilizing a theme approach unconnected to the children, their development, and their interests. When I first started in the field over 40 years ago, that's what we did. A year ahead of time, we picked a theme and we developed our curriculum when we didn't even know who the children were. Since then, we know from research that that's an inappropriate way of approaching curriculum. Utilize your team's observations to answer these questions. What is the child's perspective? And that's one of the perspectives we looked at when we looked at chapter 12. What does the child know? What does the child want to know? What is the child exploring, experimenting with, or trying to find out? Do you see where you could add materials and opportunities to further the child's efforts? And so these are the questions that we consider as we're planning curriculum. So we can use our observations to help us complete assessments. And in fact, the assessment is much more accurate and meaningful, and we call that authentic, when it's based on consistent observations and documentations. A checklist is an example of an assessment that we might apply our observations to. Checklists are a type of assessment that determines if something is there or if it's not. So an example in your textbook is a math concept checklist, sorting objects according to criteria, identifying two shapes, exhibits behavior that indicates an understanding of one-to-one correspondence, uses simple measurement techniques. There's also a section in your textbook on page 252 and 253 where it outlines the block play stages. Stage 1 is carrying blocks. Stage 2 is where they start to build with blocks. Stage 3 is bridging. Stage 4 is building enclosures. Stage 5 is beginning to be more creative. Stage 6 is naming structures for dramatic play, and Stage 7 is rebuilding and naming for play. And for our application assignment, we're going to develop a checklist to determine what stage the child is at in their block play. Another approach that can be used using observation is the learning story approach. And this one is much more personal, and it includes some questions and thoughts of the teacher. So write, in a learning story approach, you write a story about something amazing that you observed directly to the child. So you write it like a letter. Dear Susie, that you've gotten to know during the semester. Write in the voice of someone who cares deeply and is observing and listening closely to discover what has happened. And focus on the child's strengths. What you include in the story is what happened. Describe in detail what the child was saying and doing on a particular occasion, and add reflections of your own interests. Start out with, I wonder. Next, what do you think it means? What do you see as the significance of this observation? Consider the context and child development. Connect this observation to other observations you've made in regards to this child. Opportunities and possibilities. Write about what you think what would come next and why. And then give the story a title and sign it. And so that's a more personal approach to documenting observations.